Donald Trump has been called a lot of names. The latest on the list is racist. A new poll shows a majority of Americans believe their president does not care about the problems of the African American community. Take a look.
As cliched as it sounds, Donald Trump's presidency has hit a new low. When a poll posed a question, how much do you think Donald Trump cares about the needs and problems of the black people? Americans didn't hold back. A majority of respondents, 57%, gave Trump a thumbs down. 38% said not all. 19% said not much, while 24% Americans believed that Trump cared a little. The numbers were jaw-dropping when it came to black respondents. A whopping 61% felt that Trump did not care about them at all. But the trouble for the president does not end there. The poll also found that Americans weren't sure he cared about the Hispanic people either. 42% thought Trump did not care at all about their needs and problems, while 19% thought not much. 54% of the Hispanic respondents thought the president didn't care at all. Right from his campaigning days, Trump has been criticized for his stand on extremists in America. And his latest comment on the Charlottesville violence was perhaps the proverbial last straw.
We'll never be defeated. The people united will never be.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Time and again, US President Donald Trump has used racial rhetoric to his advantage. And this, his critics say, has contributed to the steady rise in hate crimes in the country. Will this latest poll low-force him to mend his ways or be dismissed as an extension of fake news? Don't hold your breath for the answer. Bureau Report, WION.
Joining us this evening, Glenn Carl, who is an American writer and former CIA official, with us from Massachusetts. We also have Puneet Ahluwalia, Republican leader and political and business consultant from Washington. Good evening to both of you. And let's continue with this poll, shouldn't we, on television. Do you believe that he is a racist? Puneet, let's go with you first.
My president was elected by the people of America, which were all caste, creed, and religion. He's not a racist. He's working hard for the American people. It is the media which is trying to destroy him and not let him function effectively and successfully for the people of America. And more importantly, if, as he said, if you report it accurately, you will know what happened in Charlottesville. And there were people who were out, and I condemned the KKK and the neo-Nazis, and so did he, and so is every member of the Republican leadership has. But there were the people from the left wing which wanted to really create this violence and create this hysteria, and that's where we are today.
Well, I've heard this before. It's all the media's fault. Glenn, how would you have voted?
Well, we just heard I think a textbook example of selective interpretation from somebody from the Ministry of Propaganda. The history is well known, the facts are clear, and the truth is known by a vast majority of the American people. Let's take a couple of data points. Donald Trump started his public life being convicted for having denied to rent any of his apartments to black Americans in the 1970s. In the 1980s, he took out a 2-page newspaper advertisement in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 blacks who had been accused of raping a white woman. Years later, when the DNA analysis proved categorically that the 5 men were innocent, he took out another ad and called for their execution anyway. His first wife has testified that the one book, literally the one book he had by his bedside, and possibly the only book he's read in the last 35 years, was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, on and on. So his policies, his statements, all are incendiary, and they're true to his character.
Puneet, do you want to respond?
This is all garbage. This is all nonsense. That's what it is. And the reason is, what has that got to do with it? He's been elected. He's the president of the United States. Duly elected by the people, and you will see the work being done in the inner city. And mind you, if we keep talking about polls and what the media is reporting, idea is you will never see what the good work that's being done in the administration.
Why don't you tell us? Why don't you tell us about the good work?
I'll give you one prime example. Yesterday we were discussing about, is there a problem between the Secretary of Defense? We don't have ministries in the United States, sir. We have secretaries. And there we had the misinterpretation. And as today, General Mattis or Secretary Mattis came out and said, my words have been widely misinterpreted. And that's the aspect what we are discussing and trying to share with the people is that the administration, the leadership is effectively working, but it's not being portrayed well. And hence the reason why he doesn't give the time on fake news, and he tweets and he reaches out to the American people directly. And at the same time, why doesn't anybody bring out the polls? What's happening for the 66% win by Macron in France? Now he's at 34, 36%. Abe is down, May is down, but nobody brings those stories out. It's basically the polls have been brought out. It's something very ineffective. But mind you, I'll tell you another part of the history, which my friend may not know, as he's quoting history. President Reagan was at 34% during this time of his presidency. But guess what? He won with 49 states when he was re-elected president. So all this history garbage is for people that may be in the left side, be very excited to hear about it. But let's talk about reality. Let's talk about our country. Let's talk about the issue. Let's talk about things which are being done properly by this administration. And as I come back again, a great plan for India and for the South Asia region for a positive step forward and condoning terrorism and doing the right things.
You sound just like him, I have to say. Glenn, he may call it fake news, but this is a poll like many other polls, and we've seen in the past people didn't have very charitable comments about Donald Trump, and they too were Americans. As far as unpopular presidents go, and America has seen its fair share of them, would you say Donald Trump would come on top?
I think literally the polling. I think literally the polling shows that he is the most unpopular president at this period of his presidential administration of any president in history, less so than Richard Nixon, who was thrown out of office for being a crook. So the 2 points are also relevant to note. The great leader that my colleague likes to praise here will cite polls, with glee when they say something nice and then deride them as factless lies when they say something not. So that's a slightly selective interpretation of facts. And the second thing is that Ronald Reagan, the hero of the right and the man we just heard compared, taken as a reference point, did say possibly the most concise expression of what it is to be American and what the American experiment is. He said, America is not about origins, it is about destinations. It's not who you are, it's what you do and how you act. And to have a man in the Oval Office, who I hesitate to call a president, but the man in the Oval Office, deriding the judiciary when it takes a position that he doesn't like, deriding Congress when it takes a position that he doesn't like, and characterizing entire races and nationalities as rapists and thugs, drug dealers and whores and pimps and criminals, should alarm someone who listens.
I wonder if the president is listening. I'm going to leave it at that. Puneet Ahluwalia, thank you very much for being a good sport and for joining us here again.